Yeah, we are live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the special Swift Cairo webinar, A Guide to Hearing Cats. This is the May edition of our webinars, and we will have a new webinar in each early of the month. And yeah, this second time to have Dan. Yeah, welcome, Dan. It's really great to have you again, and you are very welcome and special to our community. And I really love to have you again. Yeah,
Great to be here.
I will go again to welcome back. You are founding engineer at Portola AI, and you will give us a great topic today about tips and tricks to maintain code base consistency as your team grow and your project scale. This is a really important topic. Most of developers are struggling in this point. If the team need to scale, there's a big issue and there's a lot of shouts. So the floor is yours.
All right, sounds good. Let me get sharing and we'll get started. Okay, so hello everyone. Good to be back. As Mohammed just mentioned, I'm a founding engineer at Portola AI. We are a seed stage startup. We've been growing rapidly over the last year. We've been hiring both full-time and contract. It's been a lot. But before I did this crazy startup thing, I was one of the architects behind Airbnb's iOS application infrastructure and architecture. So I know a thing or two about scaling code bases and teams. I want to start really high level. I want to start at that 30,000 foot view. And the goal of any company's engineering org, what is it, right? The goal of a company's engineering organization is to ship a product that consumers want to use as quickly as possible, right? Shipping quickly requires reducing the risk of new changes, reducing the cognitive load of engineers working on a code base. And of course, the more consistent an application architecture is, the faster engineers are going to be able to move. Conversely, the less consistent your application is, the harder it's going to be to build new features quickly. Put another way, fragmentation is a time vampire, right? I mentioned earlier that I was the architect of Airbnb's iOS application architecture. I wasn't hired into this role, though. This was a role that arose out of necessity. I give you a little bit of the origin story here. When I joined Airbnb, I worked on the messaging team. And messaging at Airbnb back then was the driving force behind revenue. This was at a time when Instant Book was still new. So the vast majority of bookings started with a message from a potential host or a potential guest to their host. Since messaging was the home for these high intent users who really wanted to spend money on our platform and therefore make us some revenue, we wanted to lean into this. We wanted to meet our users where they were. Depending on where a guest was in their stay lifecycle, we wanted to show them common actions in their messaging inbox. So for example, when a guest is checking in, we want to surface the check-in instructions right from the inbox. When a guest was about to check out, we would want to surface checkout instructions and, make sure that you clean the pool so you didn't get the $500 cleaning fee. If you're in the middle of the stay, we would show you the in-app guest guidebook. When you leave, we want to show you the option to review, right, et cetera, et cetera. We really, all in all, we just wanted to enable the inbox to route to 10 different screens across the app. This isn't 10. It's hard to fit 10 on a slide, but you get the idea, right? This should have been a simple feature. If features had consistent routing, a consistent route of the memory graph, consistent dependency injection, consistent data flow, this would have been really easy. But that was not the world that I lived in. Each feature was a special snowflake. Okay, the check-in instructions had a coordinator. This was 2017, that created its own view controller. The coordinator had to be retained by the presenting view controller or the screen would break. The presenting screen also had to listen to an NS notification to know when to dismiss the check-in instructions. This is all fine. Not how I would do it, but it's fine, except the Wi-Fi password sheet was just a view controller that dismissed itself. It was using a self-vended singleton to fetch its Wi-Fi details. The review your stay flow had a navigation controller that the presenting screen had to make itself a delegate of to know when to dismiss the flow and how to get the output of the flow. The screen used initializer injection, so every screen that created it must have every dependency that this screen required. Cool. Meanwhile, the listing details screen also had a coordinator, but its architecture was more inspired by Uber's ribs, which had a builder and a scope that needed to be constructed before you could create the screen itself. And on and on and on. None of these 10 screens had the same architecture. Okay, the code base was so freaking fragmented. Each of the 10 screens took me more than a day to integrate, right? Remember, all I'm trying to do is route to screens that already existed in the app. They were already built, and it took more than a day per screen. I had to go reverse engineer the architecture because nothing was documented. I had to go figure out how to actually present and do this thing. It was a lot of work. And then the testing was really hard as well. 10 days of integration for 10 screens is nuts, right? When I'm estimating how long it takes to build a feature, I'd estimate about a day per screen that needs to be built from scratch. Little did I expect it to take a day to integrate each already existing screen that I just wanted to present. So what did we do? We took a knife to the complexity of the app and we standardized on the basics. Now, you might be wondering, what are the basics? That can mean a lot of things, right? In my mind, if you standardize on the following, you're in a pretty good place. The basics here are dependency injection. Those who were with us, I think last month, know I have strong opinions on how to do this, but nonetheless, that's not the point of today's talk. Routing and navigation. How do you move between screens, right? The memory graph. What is the root of a feature? Is it a view controller, a SwiftUI view, a coordinator, something else entirely? Standardization helps here. And then, of course, your callbacks and data flow. When the user does an action, how does the rest of the app react to it? How do you get the output of data or of a flow? Now, note, there are only 4 basics here, and none of these are code style. If you care about code style, and I do suggest you care about code style, find a formatter. Swift format is great, and just have it automatically run in your code base on every PR. Don't fight over style. You've got a lot of yaks to shave. You got a lot of hard things to do. Fighting over style should not be one of them. Focus on the high leverage stuff. All right. The other thing I just want to throw out there before I move on is I'm not trying to give advice on what your standards should be for these basics, right? If you want to use self-ending singletons everywhere, great. If you want to use SwiftUI navigation, great. If you want to make your views the root of your memory graph, great. What matters is that you have a standard. What the standard is entirely up to you. Okay, so let's say you do the hard work and you create a standard for these things. I have bad news. Creating the standard is just the very beginning of your journey. Once you have this standard, you kind of got to write it down. And this can be a pretty intensive exercise. At Airbnb, we had over 50 pages. It was under 100, but it was a lot of pages of documentation for what we wanted our architecture to be. And this was a really helpful exercise. The engineers involved in creating this architecture, we got to reflect as we wrote, we got to simplify, we got to spend a lot of time with our thoughts and organize them so that when we went and we talked to the rest of the engineering organization, our thoughts were organized and we could point them in a document. However, devs just want to ship, right? When is the last time your manager came up to you and said, hey, have you read that document yet? Or when do you think you'll have finished reading that document by? Right? No, it's when is the feature going to ship? When is the pull request going to be ready? When's it going to land on main, right? So you take this 50-page document, 75, whatever, this long document, and you put it in front of your developers, and this is the reaction you're going to get. Not super helpful. Now, again, writing the document's important. It's helpful for the people who are coming up with this thing, especially when you're at scale and you've got a lot to think about. But be mindful of who your audience is, right? You've come up with this architecture. You want people to adopt it. They're not going to read this giant document you put together. How do you get them to do what you want them to do? Well, the answer is going to sound a little trite, but you need to make it easier to do the thing that you want them to do than the thing that you don't want them to do, right? Make it easy to follow the patterns that you have created, that you are putting in place. And again, it needs to be easier to do what you want them to do and harder to not. So how do you make it easy? What do we do here, right? This at Airbnb, I had a whole team that I joined that was responsible for developer experience. Most companies don't have that, especially the smaller ones, right? So let's say you don't have a dedicated developer experience team, but you want to have consistent code. What are some low effort steps you can take that have high ROI to make it possible to have a consistent code base? The first thing I will recommend here, and we're going to spend a good amount of time on this, is templates. Templates are key. At companies that have that developer experience team, like Lyft, Airbnb, Uber, etc. When you're making a new feature, you go through a script that asks you a bunch of questions and it comes up with a template for you. You don't need that. I don't need that. When you get big, you might need it. But for now, we start small. So why do we care about templates, right? I want you to think about the last feature you wrote from scratch, right? And I'm going to bet that most of you are not actually writing most of your new features from scratch. I'm going to guess that most of you who aren't using templates are finding the last feature you wrote or the last feature that your coworker wrote that you really liked, copying it, pasting it into a new file, deleting all the things that are specific to that feature, getting the bare bones architecture from that copy paste, and then going from there, right? No developer enjoys that particular process, right? You've got to go find the feature that you think is a good feature. You got to copy paste it. You got to delete all those things that aren't relevant to this feature. And then you got to go write the things that actually matter. In the meantime, your compiler is just telling you that everything is wrong, and you know everything's wrong, but it just takes time. So that's a time suck. Figuring out which parts of the old feature to keep is slow. You just get stuck in this molasses until you come out the other side. There are other ways you could do this, right? Instead of having engineers figure out which feature they want to copy, you can have the golden feature, that feature that works exactly how everybody wants features to work, that we've all agreed is the gold standard for how we do feature development. It's like a reference feature. But the problem with a reference feature is that keeping it up to date is hard. Deadlines happen. And then who's to say which part of the reference feature is still reference, right? If your coworker's up till 1 a.m. and they're trying to ship, they might not keep that reference feature in great shape, and you got to ship. So you're not going to push back on this PR. We'll follow up later and we'll make it better later. And in the meantime, everyone's copying the bad form that you just put in at 1 a.m. So that doesn't really work, right? However, if you make templates your always maintained source of truth, you might be in a better place. No one's modifying a template at 1 a.m. because it's not required to ship. I want, again, to zoom out for a moment and think about how code and applications evolve over time, right? In my estimation, and there's no research behind this, but bear with me, I would say the half-life of code in any consumer product is maybe 18 months, which means if you fast forward 4 years and you look at the code that's in the code base 4 years from now, I would say about 80% of the code in that code base, maybe more, was likely written in those last 4 years, right? Your new code, generally speaking, is always outpacing your old code. So if you have this clear, well-maintained source of truth, the template, and it's easy, it becomes very easy to ensure that your application is growing in the direction that you want, right? If every new feature starts by going through the template flow, well, in 4 years, 80% of your code is going to be in the form that you want it to be, right? New code outnumbers the old code soon enough. Just keep developing. As long as you're making sure that there's a template for every highly repeatable thing you do in your app, you'll be trending in the right direction. So for example, it probably makes sense to have a template for a standard feature, a template for a feature with a list in it. God knows, every app I've ever worked in had a different way of working with lists. You want one. A template for a navigation or flow control container, and a template for creating maybe a new service, right? This can help you get on the right path. Okay, I've gotten a little ahead of myself here. Not everyone in this room has used a template before, so I'm going to back up for a sec. A template is a folder with an XC template extension that lives in /library developer Xcode templates. And it has a bunch of placeholders that are replaced when a developer fills out a simple form. It's basically a find and replace file. I'm not going to go deep on how to create templates. There's a ton of prior art here. If you Google Xcode template creation and click on the first link, you're in great hands. Second link is also great. I haven't checked the third one. Okay, to use a template, all an engineer has to do is right-click on the folder they want their feature to live in, select new file from template. And I'm pretty sure everyone in this room has done this before, but maybe not with a custom template. All right, so now you're in the template picker slide. The developer needs to select the template they want. In this case, I'm going to select a feature, which is a Portola specific UI kit feature template that I wrote. We're going to name our feature. You can customize the fields in here, but all I generally need to know is the name of the feature. You hit next and voila, we have our templated feature. In Portola's case, a new UI kit feature requires a view controller whose job is to manage views, and a presenter whose job is to manage the view model and interactions with services that populate the view controller. So creating a new feature creates two files. Those files are a little bit complex, though. Don't worry about all this. I know this is a lot. Just to give you a sense of the scale of what's going on here, right? At Portola, a view controller defines a view model that updates the UI. A displayable event is another thing that we create here. It's a type that triggers animations. We also have an action, which is how the view controller sends events to the presenter. Each screen also can log that it was shown. Each screen defines at least one custom UI view for its layout. Each screen also has to import the UI library that we've standardized on using. Meanwhile, the presenter needs configuration to help it navigate. We need to set up bindings between where it came from and where it's going to go. We also need to set up bindings between the actions that are created from the view controller and sent to the presenter, right? And then both of these types need to hook up into our dependency tree. And all in all, this template creates about 250 lines of code that someone would have had to type out by hand or copy paste from another file that might have done things the right way, right? 250 lines. One of the beautiful things about templates is they make boilerplate not a big deal. The amount of time I've seen engineers spend trying to reduce boilerplate over my career is a lot. The problem with boilerplate, though, is not that it exists. The problem with boilerplate is that it's hard to write and harder to write consistently. Remember, engineers, you, me, we want to deliver features quickly. That is our job. That's why we get paid. We get paid to deliver features. Engineers don't want to sit there typing out a bunch of stuff before they get to start the work of building the feature that they need to build, right? Most architectures, actually all architectures, have some form of boilerplate, right? It turns out you can eliminate most of the pain of that boilerplate, though, by shoving it into your template. So zooming out, let's remind ourselves of the goal, right? We remember the easy button. The goal is to make it easy for developers to do what you want them to do, and consequently, making it harder to do what you don't want them to do. And when deadlines are in the mix, you need your interventions to occur as early as possible in the development lifecycle. I'm going to say that one more time because it's really important. You want your guardrails to be as early in the development cycle as possible. If you're trying to correct somebody's architecture at pull request review time, you're way too late. The deadline is done. They've already built the feature. Sure, it's architected wrong, but it works, and our customers need the feature. So what's going to happen? We're going to ship it. And who's going to clean it up? Absolutely nobody. Developers, like humans, like all humans, will take the easiest path in front of them, right? As somebody who's trying to make a code base consistent or to keep it consistent, you want to make consistency the easiest thing to do. And templates are a huge part of that battle. Okay. So, will templates alone prevent your code from fragmenting? No, but they're a really good start. All right. Let's go back to the basics. What are the things we care about, right? We care about dependency injection, routing and navigation, consistent memory graphs, and callbacks and data flow, right? So what else can we do to end up in a world where these things are consistent? We already have templates, so new code is already in the right world. But how do we, once the initial code is written, keep being consistent, right? The answer is encapsulation. The more you can keep things separate from each other, the more your things are and having similar interfaces, the more it's going to be easy to maintain consistency. And when I talk about encapsulation, what I'm really talking about is modularization. Most apps out there start with just a single module or framework, right? It's probably all in an Xcode project. This module or Xcode project just grows over time. And when compile times get really bad, or you're building your first extension, you start factoring your code out into multiple modules. In Xcode, creating a new module sucks. So most people don't do it. There's an easier way to manage new module creation, though, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But first, why am I talking about modules? Because your dependencies matter. And I'm not just talking about dependency injection. I'm talking about what pieces of code depend on what other pieces of code, right? The way your code is shaped, the way your dependencies are shaped, dramatically affect how data flows through your application. And when your application is just one module, it's very easy for a new hire or a contractor who's trying to meet that deadline to take a shortcut that circumvents your app architecture, right? Let's say that in your desired application architecture, your features, your view controllers and views depend on services that maintain shared state between different features and not the other way around, right? Features depending on services. Well, if your features and your services are in the same module, there's no hint to that new hire or contractor that they shouldn't make a service depend on a feature. But if you have a features module that depends on a services module, and all of your features live in features and your services live in services, there's actually no way to have a service that depends on a feature unless you put the service in the features module, at which point, well, I think the engineer knew they were taking a shortcut at this point, right? And they chose to ignore the guardrails you had put in place. You can't stop people from doing bad things. You can make it easier for them to do the right thing, right? As long as you do that, you'll end up in the right place in the long term. So, okay, cool. I think I've sold you that modules are helpful, but we're still stuck on modules are hard. So how do we make modularization easy? Well, I got a quick demo for you. All right, give me one moment over here. I got to switch my screen. So, okay, over here on the left-hand side, I basically got the output of file new project with a modularization example project. On the right, I have a package package.swift that has a single file in both sources and tests, right? All we got to do here in order to get a package.swift, which has modularization built in and very simple to do, into our Xcode project is literally drag and drop. Just drag this bad boy over. We get the reference. We hit finish. And then we have our module here. And so let's go into the example target itself. And I already did this, so hold on, I'm going to undo that real quick. Once we're here, we get to add the main target of the package.swift as a dependency. And now, when I look at my content view, we've got this, hold on one moment, make that guy go away. We've got our content view that's saying hello world. Again, this is pretty straightforward standard stuff. Over in my library, I've got a hello world, and we're importing my library here. So we should just be able to go like that, hit build, and build succeeded. There we go. So now we have modularization through a package.swift. And in fact, in my apps, all of my code lives in the package.swift, not the Xcode project. So I would actually shove this into my library. Now, when you do this, please remember your Xcode project target needs one file in it. If it doesn't have one Swift file, it will not compile. So I generally have one file in my Xcode project with a comment explaining why it exists. Okay, cool. So that's our demo. We've got modularization now. We've made it easy. So you've got your templates, you've got your modules, and that makes it really easy to have some form of consistency. And once you have some form of consistency, it tends to self-propagate, which is great. It just keeps going over the long haul. So you might be thinking, okay, this is all great information, or maybe it's not. I don't know. You might be thinking this doesn't apply to me because I've got 10 engineers, I've got 12 engineers, I've got 100,000 lines of code already. None of it's consistent. I'm hosed. But remember, it's never too late. I know most people in this room have not had the pleasure of going and hitting file, new project, and shipping that to the App Store. But just because there isn't consistency yet doesn't mean we can't create some, right? Remember, over a long enough time period, new code will always be a larger percentage of your code than old code. So if you start today, you will get there. Conversely, it's never too early to strive for consistency. Just because you're one developer or two developers doesn't mean you shouldn't have a template. It's going to save you time too. I'm currently running a 4-person team, and we had templates from 2 people. Makes life better. You don't need dedicated resources to maintain them. These tools, both modularization and templates, are really straightforward. We also had modularization from day one because never too early. Okay, with that, any questions?
Hey Dan, it's really interesting topic, and interesting. Yeah, and yeah, I already like prepared a lot of questions related to the session, and it's really, I think it will be helpful. So, like my question here, it will be like, if the team want to improve code consistency starting from tomorrow. Currently, we have
Yep.
project and we need to start tomorrow. And yeah, like what are the lowest hanging fruits you recommend to start?
Yeah. I mean, it's truly those two things, right? Like create a template, figure out what the core of your feature is, and put it in a place that's repeatable. That's step one. And then I would also honestly recommend starting to modularize. And that can feel really daunting, not just because creating modules is hard, because I just showed you a way to make that easy, but moving code into modules is hard, right?
Yeah.
Are your dependencies already set up in a way that you could just pull this file out? Probably not. But like if you start today, you'll be able to get there. The other trick that I use when I'm starting to pull modules apart is the underscore or at underscore exported import. That is a such a good trick. So what the exported import does is you put it in your old module where say you have module A that has all of your code and now you're creating module B. In module A, you can put at exported import B. And what that does is it means that every file in module A is automatically importing module B. And so if you move a file out that's in module A that everybody was depending on, well, you don't actually have to update every call site to import module B. Is that a good thing to do long-term? No. But by the time it's a problem long-term, you're going to be able to have somebody on staff who can help deal with that.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's really, the other thing you need, honestly, is you need some level of agreement that you want to do things the right way or a similar way, right? And if you create a template, but your other coworker is like, well, no, I don't want to use combine. I want to use observable because that's the future. Well, you're going to need to have that conversation because if they don't want to use the template, then you're host, right? So like, or it's partially wanting to use a template and partially just making it that much easier to use the template. But some level of buy-in is definitely important.
Yeah. We have another question from our
Yeah.
friend Ahmed Hassan.
Yes.
So, yeah, why logging is added on the
Yeah.
view
Okay.
controller?
I'm seeing it. What logging is added at the view controller level and what does this displayable event mean? So these are pretty deep in our application architecture. I don't want to get too deep on it here because this is just the architecture I like. Does it apply to every app? Probably not. But what I do is my view controllers define their name for logging and what properties they want logged. Our flow controllers, which are the things that are responsible for presenting our view controllers. When they present a new view controller, they will read that logging data off of the view and publish it to the logging system. It's really simple stuff. It's just like codable and sendable properties and a title, right? And then displayable event is, all right, I'm trying to think of a way to describe this quickly, but like, basically, when you think about Swift UI, right, your model object or presenter is effectively your observed object, right? It has state that is your view model. You might also have a publisher on that model that says, hey, this thing happened. Go show an update with this thing or animate a celebration because a user just completed some task, right? It's not something that necessarily belongs in a view model because you're not updating what you're displaying, you're updating the animation for how you display it. It's not something that you would want to apply over and over again. It's a one-off. So that's a displayable event.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in my case, they're enums.
Yes, exactly. I have another question.
Yeah.
I think it's a common issue when you use packages and templates. Like, how do you maintain the alignment when multiple teams are contributing at the same code base? And the common issue, it's circle dependencies between two packages.
Yeah. It's really hard. It's really hard. It's pretty important to have some kind of documentation on what should depend on other things, right? So in my package.swift file, I'll have comments at the top of each target of like, these are the kinds of modules that should be able to depend on this. And so at least when an engineer is looking at it, they can see my thought process. It's there next to the code. Do they read it? Not necessarily, but like it's at least there. And then when you end up with the circular reference problem, say you've got a logging library and a networking library, and you want to log your network events, which one depends on which can become a really hard problem. I generally use, I'm a huge fan of Combine personally. I know it's not the latest and greatest, but it works pretty darn well. I just put a publisher in the lower level module that the higher level module can depend on or send messages to, right? Like publishers are a really good way to decouple and basically invert that dependency a little bit. Instead of having the logging event or the networking system log directly to the logging service, you can have it emit events and have the logging service depend on the networking service if that's a requirement for you.
Yeah, I think Hassan have a quote: "You can't stop people for doing bad things, but you can make it easier for them to do the right things."
Yeah, really, it's really hard to get a bunch of people to align, but if you make it easier for them to do the right thing, they will do it more often than not. And that's the battle. That's the whole ball game, right? I will tell you the re-architectured Airbnb. I kicked that off in 2019.
Yeah.
They finished it a month and a half ago. Took them 6 years, right?
Yeah.
But they did it. And they did it because every new piece of code was in this new world. And then the real secret was they took employed a contractor for 2 years and had them clean up the old world that no one wanted to touch. But that was still cheaper and better than not doing that, right? So not everybody has the luxury of having a contractor to help clean up the old world, but the concept that you need to complete these kinds of migrations is honestly, it's a little silly, right? At huge scale, it's helpful. At the scale most companies are at, where you've got 2 to 10 people, doesn't matter, right? The old code will eventually, especially if it's high velocity code, will end up in the new world, right? The low velocity code, who cares? It's low velocity. It's not causing you any pain.
Yeah, got it. I think I will take question from this, like where you draw the line between like the useful abstraction and over engineer. Like most of us struggle in this point.
Me too. My big sin at Airbnb is I made the system a little bit too complicated. So yeah, what I would say is never be afraid to change your mind and go back and revisit the architecture you've created and say, hey, this was too complicated. We're going to simplify it. We're going to update our templates and the new world is going to get better, right?
Yeah.
Like you can fragment within your world, because if you fragment as a whole company, you've got these moments in time that are different, but at least they're consistent with each other, right? And again, that will over time standardize. And the best thing is, in the modern world that we're in with LLMs, when you have really standard code, it becomes way easier to do mass migrations because AI can do it for you. Now, are we there today? No. Will we be in 6 months? I think so. So like the more you've got some level of consistency, the more we will have the tools to keep that consistency.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah.
We have another or a new question from Omar.
So once you have a module in Swift Package Manager, anybody can depend on it. It's pretty straightforward. You basically just add it as a new dependency to your other targets when you want to use it. One of the really, really cool things about Swift Package Manager, though, is that it's code, which obviously it's code, but like package.swift is a Swift file. So let's say you want to be really advanced and you want to make some compile time rules that certain modules can't depend on other modules, you can do that validation in the package.swift and fatal error in there with an error message, and it will show up in the package resolution log. So like package.swift is an incredibly powerful tool. And sure, there are more powerful tools out there, like Bazel, for example. But like, if you don't have a developer experience team, you shouldn't be mucking with that anyways. I don't know if I answered the question, though. If you've got more for me, I'm happy to get in there.
Yeah. I think I have a last question, but I think it might relate it to the topic. But if you could back and give yourself, younger self, like you are a junior iOS developer, just one piece of advice about building a scalable app or consistent code base. Like, what's the advice you can give to a junior developer?
Yeah. I mean, I covered this a little bit, but I want to repeat it because it's important.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of boilerplate. Trying to optimize boilerplate away is going to make it harder for other people to read and understand what you're doing. The more generics you throw into your code in order to get rid of a few lines of binding, the more people are going to look at what you've built and say, what are you doing? Right? Like, the more you can keep it simple, and simple sometimes involves copying and pasting, the better. Keep it simple. That's the big piece of advice.
Yeah. Yeah, as you said, keep it simple as you can. Yeah. I think we don't have any other questions. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us again and sharing some rich, actionable insights about templates, modularization. And we always learn something new from you. And we need you in another session. It's really, I'm looking forward for another one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure, and I'll see you all soon.
Yeah. So everyone who tuned in, thank you for being part of Swift Cairo community, keeping building, keeping learning, sharing knowledge, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks. So speak soon. Bye-bye.